it was a hobby first, and then it was a hobby totally out of control. And then it became a hobby totally out of control that was also sort of therapy. Because we figured that there's three times in your life that you don't want to save on your money. Well, it's on birth, it's on your honeymoon, and it's when people die. And I think that you should only create work that is really close to yourself and not influenced by other people, because then you venture into different areas that are no longer you, and then you will no longer be original.
Hello, welcome to The Best Advice, talks with thinkers and doers. I'm Frank Arnold. With my guests I talk about extraordinary achievements, the best advice my guest ever got, as well as insights and stories from an exciting and successful life. If you too want to learn from these exciting personalities, be most welcome to this video and podcast. Please enjoy. My guest today is Marsel van Oosten. Marsel has worked in the advertising industry very successfully, winning, among others, 2 Golden Lions at the Cannes International Advertising Festival. After 15 years, Marsel decided to become a full-time professional photographer, specializing on nature and wildlife photography. His work is being displayed in galleries and museums around the world, and his work has been featured in prestigious magazines such as National Geographic and many others. He won many coveted prizes, including Wildlife Photographer of the Year, International Nature Photographer of the Year, and Travel Photographer of the Year. Marsel lives in South Africa, where he organizes photography tours for small groups around the globe. Please enjoy this fascinating conversation. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I highly appreciate it, Marsel.
You're most welcome.
And well, thank you so much for taking the time, and I'm very curious to hear about your best advice. But before we start, I would like to ask you a bit about your way into photography. Because you did not start right away as a photographer. You have an interesting history, you've also profound studies, and you had some detours before you actually started as a professional photographer. And I would be very curious on your background. How did you get started into photography? Or were you one of those wonder kids who already at the age of 12 knew that they're going to be one of the best photographers in the world?
No, not at all. No, when I was a kid, I didn't know what I wanted to become. And then later I thought I wanted to be a journalist. So that's when I decided to study Dutch language and literature at the university in the Netherlands.
Yes.
And I did that for 2 years. And then I quickly realized that I spent way more time on the graphic design of my papers than the contents of it. So that already told me something. And then I decided to go to art school. I come from a creative family. My sister also went to art school. My nephews went to art school. My father is really creative. So it was actually not a big surprise. So I went to art school, and in art school, I had the opportunity to do a whole lot of different courses, photography being one of them. But funnily, I didn't really enjoy photography at all at the time, because at that time photography was still film, so it involved messing around with chemicals in your toilet.
Yes.
And because obviously when you're a student you live very small, so you don't have a dark room. So that was not something that really appealed to me. So I decided to study graphic design and art direction, and I actually graduated in both those. So then I had a BA in graphic design, art direction, and then I got a job in advertising, basically.
So you went from art school directly into advertising?
Yes, directly.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how long did you stay in advertising?
So I was an art director for 15 years. Yeah.
15 years?
Yeah,
Wow.
15. Yeah. And in the beginning I was art director, later I was creative director. And
Yes.
then the last 3 years, I had my own advertising agency.
Mm-hmm. And after 15 years and having established your own company, which is, as all entrepreneurs is a lot of work to establish your own company. Why did you quit? I mean, after 15 years, you have a network, you're established, you have your credentials, you have a lot of references. So why do you quit then?
It's something that just grew over time. So the advertising world is super fast-paced, and everything has to be ready yesterday. There's a huge pressure, especially on the creatives. So as an art director, I work with a copywriter, and we always had these sometimes very big assignments, and there's just pressure, also financial pressure, because a lot of those accounts were like multi-million-dollar accounts. So you always had to come up with something really clever or something really funny, like good advertising. And you always start from scratch. And then there's always that time pressure. And when you're young, that's very easy to deal with, because you're flexible and it's easy you're full of energy. But then later it just drains you. So I got more tired. And also the other thing is that I've always really enjoyed advertising, like very much, because it's just so nice to be able to come up with an idea, and then someone else pays you to actually create that idea, whether it's a commercial or a radio commercial or a billboard or an ad in a newspaper.
Yes.
So that's really nice. But if you're creative, you have your own opinions and your own ideas on how things should look.
Yes.
But then in the end, it's always the client that is in charge. So it's a client that eventually tells you, like, I don't like that, or I don't like that, or I want the logo bigger, or I want the typeface to be that color.
Yes.
And after a while, that just gets very annoying. If you're creative, to have someone else tell you what to do. And
makes sense.
That was one of the reasons I wanted to switch. And the other one was just basically stress and always running to get things finished, the time pressure. Those were two important reasons, and those were the two reasons I actually started to spend more time doing my hobby. My hobby was my escape from my fast-paced life in advertising.
I can relate to that. But then in the end, it is still one thing of having a hobby and enjoying your leisure time with it. But on the other hand, it's something very different to quit a well-paid job to do something that you love, or that you love more, I would say, in this case, because you loved advertising as well. So what made you quit in the end? Because it's quite a risky decision to take.
Yeah, so like I said, it grows over time. So it was a hobby first, and then it was a hobby totally out of control. And then it became a hobby totally out of control that was also sort of therapy. So, and then I realized that I was really feeling super happy when I was photographing. And then when I went back to work, it was not the same. So I developed this strange routine where I got up super, super early in the morning to drive out of Amsterdam to a nature reserve. I was there before sunrise. Then I would start taking sunrise photographs. Then I would get back in the car, drive back to work, and then start the day. And then after a while, I thought, if I'm so much happier doing photography, maybe I should think about making it my new job. And that's a scary thing to think about, because I had no proper schooling for that. I was not graduated in photography at all, so I didn't go to photography school. So the only way for me to figure out whether I was good enough was to enter my work into competitions. So that was basically the first real step towards a new career, because I wanted to figure out if I was good enough.
So that was the point I was about to ask. What made you decide to start with competition? Because it seems to be the hardest place to start. I mean, if you're not a professional photographer and you're entering these big competitions, it is quite hard to be even recognized, not even mentioning getting into the final selections, and not even mentioning winning at the end. What made you
Yeah,
decide that you
true.
wanted to start right at the top?
Well, I just wanted to know where I was at, what my quality was.
Okay.
And if you're creative, it's super difficult to measure it. Like if I was an athlete and I wanted to run the 100-meter sprint at the Olympics, all I had to do was just have a stopwatch, and then I could run.
And you have to be fast.
If my result is over 9.5 seconds, or what is it, 10 seconds, I'm probably never going to make it. But if you do something creative, you can't really measure creativity. It's really hard. So I decided, I cannot trust the opinion of my friends and family because they're easily impressed. So I thought I have to find another way. And the competitions for me made a lot of sense because I thought, well, there's going to be people that don't know me, and the bar is like really high. So if I make it to the finals, or somewhere, then at least that's an indication that I'm on the right track.
But Marsel, may I ask, what did your wife or your partner say when you were about to leave a high-paying job and said, well, I'm going to make this hobby my passion, I'm going to work for it and do it a full-time job? What did your surroundings say? Did they encourage you to do that, or were they discouraging you?
A little bit of both. So when I told it to my wife that I wanted to do this, she was immediately very supportive. So she said, like, well, if that's what you want to do, if you think that's what's going to make you happy, then by all means do that. And so I actually did that right after we talked about it, because we had lunch when I told her, and then when I got back from lunch to the office, I got the other partners with me, and I said I'm quitting.
What did they say?
They were absolutely shocked. Yeah, they were very shocked. Yeah, they were very shocked. They were not amused, but also supportive. Like they said, like, well, if that's what you have to do what your feeling tells you. So
yeah, it's very.
So
good.
they supported us, but from friends and family, we did get a lot of very critical questions, like, yeah, but how are you going to make money? And you have a good life now, and you're throwing it all away. And I guess they're right. From their perspective, it was very understandable, because we did have a very good job, in advertising, especially in those days. You could make a lot of money, and we did, because we both worked in advertising.
Yeah.
And basically what we told each other, okay, so if we're going to quit, because my wife also wanted to quit, so we said, we're going to do this together. And then we realized that this was going to be a choice, possibly for poverty in some way. and we just told each other, it doesn't matter as long as we're doing something that makes us happy. We'll figure out a way to make money with it, but it's better to be happy and trying to make ends meet than to have plenty of money and just be miserable every day.
But let me ask that. So you actually made the decision to quit your job before you had your final business plan in place. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I knew nothing about how I was going to make money. It was just I had it up to here with advertising, and I just couldn't take it any longer. And I was like, I really desperately want to switch careers, and I want to become a photographer. And I was just confident that I would find a way to make it work, even though I had absolutely no clue.
And may I ask, how did you start in the beginning? I mean, what was your initial business plan then? Because especially you're specialized on wildlife photography, on landscape photography, and this involves a lot of traveling, which is especially for the regions you go to, it's extremely expensive because you have to travel far in a lot of cases. How did you go about that?
Yeah,
when did you start?
That's a good question. Yeah, that was a massive problem because
indeed.
Yeah, after I physically quit in advertising, my wife and I decided, we have to come up with a plan very quickly because now there's no income now anymore. So we decided to rent a Airbnb on one of the Dutch islands basically in autumn, very miserable weather. And we did that to be away from everything and to just start brainstorming for a couple of days. And one of the things we figured out was that if you want to make a name of yourself as a photographer, you need to have a good quality portfolio. And clearly I didn't have that, because the only photographs I had were just holiday snaps and some photographs that I took in Tanzania from our honeymoon. So that was clearly not going to do it. So then we decided, I have to basically first spend a lot of time to just take a lot of really good photographs. So we decided we wanted to go to Africa and spend like a year in Africa, going from country to country, photographing as many different places, animals, landscapes as possible. And then I would have a really large portfolio. And then the year after that, I would be able to market all those photographs. So we made a big plan. And then Daniela, my wife, she calculated what the cost would be. And it was like, I don't know, I think it was like 150,000 euro or something. It's completely insane, because a lot of those lodges that that you need to stay at are like super expensive, and also getting from all those bush lodges is expensive because you have to use like small bush planes. So that is, we were not able to do that. So then we had to come up with a smart solution. How are we going to be able to still do what we want, but without actually having to pay all that money for it? And then we figured out, let's do a book. Let's make a book on safari lodges, so we can have all the safari lodges pay for our trip, basically.
Yes.
And we quickly found out that there was not many of those books. There was only a few, and all those books did the same thing. They only showed in the inside and outside of the safari lodges. And we thought that makes no sense, because you go to those places for the wildlife, for the landscape. So then we realized there's not a book like that actually incorporates also all the activities you can do at the lodges and all the wildlife and all the landscapes. So then we noticed, okay, this is going to be our USP, because there is not a book already like that. So we're going to be the first ones to make a book like that. So that's what we did. I made a very big dummy. We sent it to all the lodges where we wanted to go. And we told them, this is the book, that's what we're going to make, and you have to pay us that much money, and then you'll be featured in the book. So that was the opposite approach, basically. And then we ended up being able to do exactly what we wanted, but instead of paying for it, we were being paid for it.
Yes. And I suppose you had a particular target group in mind as well. I assume, because those lodges are usually, I mean, you mentioned it already, they're very expensive. And did you have a target group in mind? Did you do some research in the beginning, or? Yeah,
we did, because like the first research I did was, where are the subjects that I want to photograph the most? So the wildlife that I was really interested in. And a lot of those animals and also the landscapes that I wanted to photograph were in like really remote areas. And the lodges that are in those super remote areas tend to be super high-end lodges. So we knew that the book, well, if we wanted the book to be featuring all those high-end lodges, the book itself needed to be targeted at people that can afford those lodges.
Yes.
So we decided to market the book as a book for honeymooners, because we figured that there's three times in your life that you don't want to save on your money. You just want to spend it all. It's on birth.
Talking from experience there, right?
It's on birth. It's on your honeymoon, and it's when people die. Those 3 moments, people never, money is never an issue. So we figured, we're going to target the book at honeymooners. So the title of the book was first Honeymoons Deluxe. So luxurious honeymoons. And later the title was changed to, what was it? Wild Romance. And
okay, great.
So that's how it started.
Yeah, great story. And you said you do a lot of, you also do vacation. Well, you do guided tours, I say. It's not vacations, it's like guided tours, right? And with your company's Square.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, it's so in the beginning when we figured out, so after we did the book, then I had my portfolio, and then we thought, okay, how are we going to market all these images? What am I going to do with them?
Yes.
And then the first thing we thought about was a very obvious one. That was selling all my photographs to stock agencies. Because we thought that would be a good idea, because then you can just keep adding to your online portfolio, and those images will just keep on selling ad infinitum. But around that time, that was also when digital photography had just taken off, and the stock market was like completely collapsing. And then we realized, that might actually not be a good idea, because we'd have to sell like thousands and thousands of images, and then we'd still not make enough money. And so we had been to Namibia for the book, to photograph there. And when I started sharing my images from Namibia on online forums, I got a lot of feedback from people that had never seen images like that before, like from the landscapes and all the places that we've been to. And they said, well, if you're ever going there again, I'd love to join you. And that's when we thought, we might actually do that. We could just go back there, and we bring a...
May I ask, was it actually more or less a coincidence? It sounds a bit like it. It was not like a major business plan that you had, I do the book, sell the book, and then do travels.
No, it was a coincidence. So I just sort of happened. We thought, this might actually work. And so that's the first thing we tried. So we took a small group of people with us to Namibia. And it was such a big success that after that trip, those people asked us, okay, where are we going next? So then we knew, like, okay,
on the tour.
The same people. They wanted to go with us somewhere else. So that's when we started, okay, let's set up some other tours. And that's how we built an entire brand offering specialized photographic tours, all aimed at wildlife and landscape all over the planet. And when we started, this was actually quite original, because at the time there was only a handful of people worldwide doing it, like probably only like maybe 50 or something all over the world. And so we were lucky that we started then, because now that has really like exploded. So there's now tons and tons of people trying to do the same thing, but for them it's hard because they're already competing with so many companies.
And your marketing in the beginning, was that mainly your book, or was that again coming back to the competitions that you used at the very beginning of your career? What was it? Was it magazines? Was it your book, or was it competitions? Did you have a particular marketing tool that you used?
Yeah, it was definitely not the book, because that was just like a niche, so something completely different. So it was a little bit of everything. So one part was me sharing my images on online photography forums. So I was active on several forums, so all for photographers. So other photographers saw my work and they saw that I offered tours. So if another photographer saw my work and they liked it very much and they wanted to go to a similar place, then that's how we got a lot of our business actually from all those forums. And then the photography competitions were also very good, because initially I used the photography competitions only to figure out whether I was good enough to make it as a photographer. But then once I was in photography, I realized that it would also be a very good way to get noticed by publishers, because I figured that the publishers would probably look very closely at the results of all those competitions, because for them it's like very easy. They get like a whole bunch of super high quality images that they know will be very popular, and that turned out to be true, because I won an award. I don't recall what kind of reward, but because of that award, I got approached by National Geographic that they were interested in that particular image. And so when they contacted me, I said, well, if you like that image, then you're probably going to like this and this and this and this and this image also. So I sent them a bunch of other images. And then they said, well, actually, yes, we do like those other pictures too. So we'll publish all of them.
But wasn't it like a dream come true? I mean, if National Geographic calls you for a photo. I mean, that's probably the highest honor, one of the highest honors for a photographer.
Yeah, it was kind of surreal because that already happened within a year after I finished with the book. So that was only my second year of being a photographer. And what we all do, obviously, is when you start, and if you're ambitious, you set yourself certain goals. So for me, I set myself 2 goals, like that's the ultimate that I can achieve. And one of the goals was to get published in National Geographic, like once. So, and I was thinking that hopefully that will happen sometime during my career, and clearly never expecting it to happen that soon. And that really did a lot for my career and also for our business, because after that, people had noticed me, and then our business really took off.
But Marsel, may I ask, it's reaching a summit. I mean, you've achieved your goals so early in your career. It is like reaching a summit that you've planned for, well, maybe a couple of years or even decades later to achieve. How was that for you? Wasn't that in a way disturbing or even maybe discouraging? I mean, you've reached your biggest goal right at the beginning. I mean, what is left to do?
Yeah, but I had more than one goal. So this was just this was one, and it was a bit early, but okay. I still had other goals. So there was still certain competitions that I really wanted to win in, because at that stage I had never managed to win awards in certain competitions, like the Wildlife Photographer of the Year or something. Yeah. Super hard, because it's only it's like 100 images, I think, every year that gets selected from tens of thousands. Yeah. So it's like close to impossible. And so that was one of my goals. And so you have a couple of those. So there's always something left that you can work towards.
Yeah, raising the bar. Let's talk about your motto. We've previously discussed it a bit. It's about doing something unique. Would you like to elaborate a bit on that?
Yeah, sure. So so before I explain that, I'd like to explain something that led to that, and that's so when I was in advertising, I was doing something creative, creating ideas, and also in advertising there were competitions for the best advertising in the world. So the International Advertising Festival in Cannes, for instance. Yes. That's like the Oscars of advertising. Yes. And so every art director and copywriter wants to win something in that competition. And the only work that gets awarded is super original work. So that's how we're trained. We were trained to be always as original as possible. Mm-hmm. The worst thing you could do as a creative in advertising was to create an ad or a commercial based on an idea that had already been used before by someone else. That's like the biggest shame imaginable. Mm. So in my first year in advertising, so I was an art director, my first real paid job, we made a big ad for Honda. It's like a sports car for Honda. And then later that ad got an award in a competition, but not any competition. It's the copycat competition. So the first award that I ever won was like an award of shame, because I had created something that had already been created by someone else. So that really woke me up and made me super alert. Like, okay, that's definitely not gonna happen anytime again. So that's one thing. And then in art school, obviously, you also learn, throw away everything you've learned and start new, and try to be as original as possible. So that's how I was trained and drilled. So that's still how I think. Despite it being extremely hard in my line of work, in what I do.
And in art school, Was there an experience that comes to mind that sort of emphasized that point?
There's a couple, but there's one that really made a lasting impression. So in my first year in art school, I had a lot of different classes because after the first year, that's when you choose and then you specialize in something. So in that first year, I had a lot of classes that I was not particularly interested in, but I still had to do. And one of them was sculpturing. So we had sculpture class, and we got assignments for a semester. The semester usually like 3 months, I think it was. And then so we all got a huge chunk of clay, like clay from the river, like this big, and we all got our personal pedestal. So we put our clay on the pedestal, and then we started like messing around with it and trying to make something good. And then we spent a few months on that, like every week, an hour or so. And then at the end of the semester, the whole class was there and the teacher was there. And then we had like the teacher giving us grades of all our sculptures. So the way that he did it is he walked to each student, looked at the sculpture, and then asked a couple of questions, and then gave him or her a grade.
Yes.
So he did that with a lot of students, and then when my teacher arrived at my sculpture, he asked me a couple of questions that I don't remember. I answered, and then after I had answered, he said, "Okay, so now I want you to pick up your sculpture and throw it against that wall over there." And I was like, "What?" so
the same one you've worked on for a couple of months.
A couple of months, yeah. So we're in this huge room with massive white walls and lots of natural light, and so I was shocked at first, but at the same time I was not like totally concerned, because after all it was just a sculpture. I really wasn't, I couldn't care less. And so I picked up the sculpture and did exactly what he said. I just threw it against the wall. And so everybody laughing, the sculpture, like, because it was still sort of wet, it just completely deformed when it hit the wall. It stuck to the wall and it just hung there for like a couple of seconds. And then it fell down on the floor. And then the teacher, he said to me, "Okay, let's have a look now." So we walked to the sculpture and we both looked at it. And my teacher asked me, "So what do you think? Has it improved?" And I looked at it and I said, "I think it has." And he said, I agree. And he said, "Yes, I agree." And then he gave me a really high grade. So,
wonderful.
It was amazing.
Wonderful story. And from there, you derived actually a sort of a lesson, right? So, right?
Yeah. So the obvious lesson is that the most obvious one is that when you create something, you get used to what you're working on, and you get very easily like satisfied and sort of complacent with the fact that this is what you have created. And what I learned from that incident is that you should always keep questioning yourself. Like there's always room for improvement. You can always completely change it around, and especially that the part of like questioning what you're doing. That is something that I've really embraced, and so that is something that I've incorporated in my way of working, and so I'm constantly asking myself a bunch of questions when I'm working.
Yes, and looking back, is there an advice that you can pass on to the next generation of young photographers, for example, or young people at the beginning of their career? Is there an advice from your side that comes to mind?
Well, there's several that I can give. I use a formula that consists of those questions that I just mentioned, And I think that actually works for everyone. So the formula is WWWWH, and that's
Okay.
that's short for what, why, when, where, and how. So you first ask yourself, what are you going to photograph? That's the easy one. And then the second one is a really important question. That's the why question, because that forces you to put into words, why am I going to photograph this? Why do I want to photograph this? And if your answer is, I want to photograph this because I already saw other photographs by other photographers that I really liked, then you're basically going to do something that is similar. So I usually try to already pay attention to that second question. And the third question is, where are you going to photograph it? Which has a profound effect on how your image is going to look. Because for instance, it's the location.
Yes.
Is it going to be green or is it going to have snow? And the fourth question is when. So the weather conditions. And the last question is how. So that's the tools and the techniques that you're going to use.
Yes.
So that would be one of my advices.
Mm-hmm.
To use that simple formula.
And which one do you think is
it
the most challenging from those? Is there a particular one that you have an emphasized focus on, or are they all equal in importance?
They're all important, but the second question for me is the most vital one, the why question. Because if you look at social media, for instance, nowadays, or if you look at Instagram, you see that the vast majority of people that post images, they're posting images that they've seen before and that they know that have been very popular and they want also to be very popular. So then they photograph the same subject, for instance, even in the same style, hoping to get just as popular. And that ties in with my second advice, is to not do that and to stay true to yourself. And by that I mean you have to always do the things that come from within and not from external forces. So if you ask yourself, who am I and what do I like and what are my, for instance, my aesthetical preferences, you can make a whole list of the things that are really you. And I think that you should only create the work that is really close to yourself and not influenced by other people, because then you venture into different areas that are no longer you, and then you will no longer be original.
Yes, makes absolute sense. Is there an advice on photographing, or on taking pictures, sort of a technical advice that you would like to pass on? Because a lot of people admire your work. Is there one thing that you would think that is important for people to focus on?
There's many, but one of the simple ones is actually one that I didn't really know when I started, and I didn't pay attention to, and that's the backgrounds in a photograph. So for me now, the backgrounds in my photographs are just as important, and sometimes even more important than my subjects, to the extent that if I don't like the background, I sometimes decide to not even take the photograph, as good as the foreground may be, because a background should not be distracting. A background should actually emphasize the foreground, or it should interact with the foreground. It should be a positive thing. And if you compare images made by professionals and you compare them with most amateur photographs, then the thing you'll see most is the backgrounds. So in a lot of amateur photographs, the photographer is so focused on the foreground and what the subject is doing that he or she is not paying attention to what's happening in the background. And that's super important. So I spend a lot of time and effort on trying to get that perfect.
Yeah. Marsel, you sent me a couple of pictures, beautiful pictures. And would you like to elaborate on a couple of those, or maybe tell the story behind one of those pictures?
Yeah, I mean, people always like the monkey shot very much. It's always super popular. So it makes for a nice anecdote as to how it happened. So I'm sure it will be good for the video.
Okay, so how did this come about? Because I hope it's not your iPhone.
No, it's not. No.
Okay, so why didn't you explain some background on this picture?
So this is a Japanese macaque, also known as a snow monkey, and they live in a place in northern Honshu. So it's the main island of Japan, and they're famous for bathing in natural hot springs. So especially in winter when it's really cold, they like to sit in the warm hot springs.
Okay.
So it's very photogenic. So I've been going there for many years, and it's also popular with other tourists. And over the years, it got more busy. And then one year, I was there photographing, and there was a couple of other tourists. I think it was from China or something. And there was one lady that was taking photographs with her iPhone of this particular monkey. And this monkey was very close to the edge of the hot spring. And as she was taking photographs with her iPhone, she was getting closer and closer with her iPhone to the monkey, trying to get like a super close-up of it. And then eventually she got so close to the monkey that I think the monkey just thought that she was giving it to her. So the monkey snatched it from her hand and then immediately moved away from her into the hot spring. So it was in the middle of the hot spring. This tourist was like screaming and shouting, trying to convince the monkey to give the iPhone back. Monkey obviously totally not impressed, and it started playing with the phone and dunking it into the water, and it had no clue what it was, obviously. I instantly realized it as a super good photo opportunity. So I was super focused on what was happening, and I was really after this shot. Yeah. One shot where the monkey held the phone in a way a person would do. And before it did this, it actually managed to let the flash go off like 2 or 3 times. And then suddenly it held it like this for like a fraction of a second. And that's when I got this photograph.
Great. Yeah. Wonderful background story. Great, Marsel. As a closing, what are you currently working on? Do you have a particular project that you're currently working on?
Yes, I have. Last year, it's almost 2 years ago now. Yeah, I decided with my wife that we were going to take a sabbatical for 6 months. And that started in December 2019. Mm-hmm. And then halfway through our sabbatical, the whole COVID thing happened.
Yes.
And then suddenly our sabbatical of 6 months turned into a very long one. And
yes, unfortunately.
Yes, unfortunately. So that really messed up our business. But every negative has a positive. And in this case, that suddenly now I had time to go through all my images that I never have time for, and to actually work on a book. So that is what I've been doing for the past, I think, 10 months now, working on a large coffee table style photo book, and it's almost finished. So
congratulations!
Fine tuning, yeah. So that's been a massive project, and I'm really, really happy that I've been able to work on that for so long.
Yes, wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time. All the best to you. I truly enjoyed our conversation. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in person. And thanks again. All the best. Bye.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.